I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Some people are still coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started because we have lots of great stuff to talk about today, and I want to make sure we get all the time we can. My name is Christian Dawson, and I'm co-founder and board chair of the Internet Infrastructure Coalition. My day job is running Servant. Servant is a managed hosting provider. I do what most of you guys probably do. I run a company that is one of the 35,000 companies that are the nuts and bolts of the internet. So in my day job, I work with customers to help them build their businesses. What I do, what we do, what you do is it is the foundation for the entire digital economy. It's extremely important. So 2 HostingCons ago, we started having conversations about how this industry could come together and start speaking with a collective voice on issues of internet freedom, on things that were affecting our industry. We were dealing with the Protect IP Act and Stop Online Piracy Act when we started. And that was the galvanizing force around the creation of the Internet Infrastructure Coalition, which is now 65 companies strong. Many of you in the room may now be I2 Coalition members. If you are, thank you very much. We're fighting for internet freedom, and today we want to talk about what that means, what the stakes are, and what's going to happen if we win, what's going to happen if we don't. And on this stage here, I've got a number of panelists who are experts in this area. They're also, for the most part, friends that I've met along the way that have been helping us over the past 2 years. I'm going to start with some introductions, and I'm going to start with the one exception, the one person I've known longer than the past 2 years. Drew Curtis has been a friend of mine for, well over a decade. He runs a website called Fark, and if you've been to college in the past 15 years, you certainly know Fark, and probably many of you know Fark anyway. Anyway, it's a news aggregation site, and it's awesome. Drew worked with Servant for a number of years, and when the PIPA and SOPA battle was going on, I contacted Drew, and we made sure that he was one of the people that was helping drive the messages home to local legislators that PIPA and SOPA were going to do really terrible things to this industry, really terrible things to the internet, and we needed to get the word out, and we did. And since then, he's been working to fight patent trolls, which is something that we'll get into probably in a little bit. Very exciting. Next to Drew is Erik Martin. Erik Martin is the general manager of, is that the right title? Of Reddit. One of the most popular and most incredible websites on the internet. If you haven't been to Reddit, you can lose your entire life on Reddit. You can do nothing else for the rest of your life than browse Reddit all the time. It's crazy, it's like crack and it's amazing, but it does actually wonderful things for the world as well, and we'll talk about some of those things. I'm going to go ahead and go in order here. Next is Michael Petricone. Michael Petricone is the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Consumer Electronics Association. CEA has been a great friend to us since we started our organization. CEA has a great, incredible lobby run by Michael, and because the future of consumer electronics is the future of internet-connected devices, what's important to us about internet freedom is also important to them. And so we have been able to collaborate and be friends in incredible ways, and they've helped us tremendously. So we're glad to have Michael here. Next to Michael is Julie, who works for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and Julie has the most interesting title on this panel, and maybe in this room, if not anywhere. Her title is the Mark Cuban Chair to Eliminate Stupid Patents. Did I get that right? That's it. Electronic Frontier Foundation, they fight for our civil liberties online, and she is focusing on patent reform. She's doing incredible things, but just in general, she fights for our civil liberties online, and we thank her very much for it. She's doing it on a daily basis and doing an incredible job. And finally, Mike McGeary. Mike McGeary runs Engine Advocacy, and Engine started around the same time as the Internet Infrastructure Coalition, and I kind of think of them as sort of a sister organization to us because Engine Advocacy was created also in the wake of SOPA and PIPA, and they were created to fight for the legislative needs of entrepreneurs and small businesses, startups. And I kind of see internet companies and startups as being the things that are working best in America right now and the things that most need to be preserved. And so if the two of us can team up and work together on legislative initiatives, we're going to be able to do a lot of stuff, and we have been to date. So that's a little bit about the panel, and hopefully saves us having to do long introductions, and we can just jump into questions. Ultimately, there are a number of things that we want to cover today. We're talking about internet freedom, seems pretty broad, so what do we need? What do we mean, and what's at stake? Those are some of the questions we're going to go over. What are the issues? We're going to go over who controls the internet and who wants to. And we're going to talk about what are the stakes? How would a closed internet change our lives? And what would the world look like in a few years if we don't fight? And finally, we're going to focus on how do we fight? Do we control our own future? Is there strength in numbers? And do we have a chance? So these are the topics I want to cover today. And I'm going to open it up with a pretty broad question to the group, and we'll just see if we can get general answers. Okay, we say we want to fight for internet freedom. What does that mean in real, tangible ways? I mean, saying you're for internet freedom seems like it could be sort of like saying you're for sunshine and rainbows. I mean, what are we actually fighting for, and who's fighting against us?
I can take a stab. It is a broad question, and I actually think there are tons of issues that kind of face the health and well-being of the internet, and each has a different set of coalitions fighting for and against it. But I think, the way that I like to think about this, and I think the way that EFF likes to think about this, is that as more and more of our lives go online, talking about internet freedom is essentially talking about freedom. The distinction becomes really blurred. We use the internet for everything. I'm sure most of you do. So, you're talking about everything from your free speech rights, and you're talking about your privacy rights, and pretty much everything we deal with in the analog world is now facing us in the digital world, which is kind of, I guess, a vague answer, but it's a really broad question. So we worry about specific issues. I worry a lot about patent and copyright, and if that goes wrong, how certain stakeholders can kind of screw things up, make it harder for people to create, make it harder for people to communicate. And ultimately, what we fear is that if those things go wrong, the great promise of this technology to be truly transformative, to change the world, to change the democratic process, will be stymied. So
yeah, and I think from the perspectives that you're going to hear up here, it's important to reinforce the fact that we all work together, but we're also fighting for different things. That's how broad this is, and I think, Julie, your point's absolutely right. Like, it's not fighting for the internet's sake. The internet is the current that runs through our daily lives at this point. Everyone has used the internet today. Not in this room, not in Austin. Everybody at some point has done something that has touched on the internet already today. Like, it is absolutely the lifeblood of our society at this point. So when we talk about it needing to be free and open, I mean, I like to say things that are sort of grandiose in terms of statements like the internet is the most powerful force for the democratization of ideas in the history of the world, which is true. So that's why it's important to keep it free, and that's why it's important that we're all fighting on different battlefields. Julie does, great work with patent and copyright. Michael, from the frame of the consumer electronics industry, has talked about those things and so much more. Drew and Erik, our organization is fighting for things as broad as all of that, and then things like immigration and making sure we have a policy that we talked about the internet at 2020. Let's make sure that we have growth to sustain it in the United States. The kind of jobs we know we can create and are already creating, let's make sure we've got a talent pool for that. So it's very broad. It is absolutely, it touches on just about every issue, but it's the part that I love about this community is how we all work together in so many ways. How we all have our little pieces of it, but when it comes right down to it, we can all band together and sing in sort of a chorus. And some of us are baritones and some of us are altos, but we're all singing from the same hymn book, and it sounds beautiful when we make music together. And that's the most important thing, because we really can take each individual issue on this and bring it together with the frame of, what the internet, quote unquote, does for all of us. And that's one of the things we do with Engine. We, as Christian mentioned, fight for the small to medium-sized entrepreneurial high-growth community in the United States. And yes, I've said that phrase more than once, you can probably tell. But that's who we're talking about, startup companies and what they bring to the economy. But when we introduce startups to members of Congress or their staff or people who work in the White House or in legislative offices here in Texas and around the country, one of the most important things is just using it as using what they do as a frame, getting better understanding, so that the people that I saw on one of the slides you had, don't regulate what you can't understand or something like that was, one of the SOPA protest signs. Getting more and more legislators to just understand what you do is vitally important, because it is the undercurrent of all things at this point, right? It runs through so many parts of our society that it's not good enough anymore that they don't understand the internet. We've got to use that frame of reference and teach people about it, so that we can then make progress on all of the other issues we'll talk about as well. So that's my perspective.
And to the second point of Christian's question, this all makes perfect sense. Who could possibly disagree with such things? I guess I would just make the point is that you are all innovators. Innovation, by definition, is inherently disruptive, right? And the internet is probably possibly the most disruptive tool known to man. What does the internet disrupt? It disrupts existing business models. It disrupts existing structures. Most incumbents in general, don't like to be disrupted. It's human nature. Everybody in this audience, I bet, most of you get up every morning, you have the exact same thing for breakfast. If I told you that starting tomorrow, you'd have to have something totally different for breakfast every day, you wouldn't like that. So human nature is to not like to be disrupted. So if you're an existing incumbent, especially an incumbent that's been around for a while, you've got strong relationships in Congress, you've got strong relationships with the regulators, you've got strong relationships in DC, and all of a sudden, some new innovation comes up that is going to disrupt your business model. Your instinct is to run to Congress, run to the regulators, run to the courts, and say, please, please do something about this, make this not happen, right? They're not bad people, it's human nature. But these are very, very strong interests. And it's the same with governments, right? That the internet disrupts existing ways of doing things in terms of the social order. And if you're not in the United States, but internationally, if you're a top-down government, and all of a sudden the people under you are empowered and able to talk and able to organize, you don't like that. And to the extent the internet is a vehicle for that, then you're not pleased about the internet. So there are powerful interests out there that think that the innovation the internet brings is not a good thing. And the one thing I want to make you aware of is that the internet right now works in certain ways for you. It has been incredibly beneficial for you, for your companies, and for society, right? But these things are not locked in. These things are not in the Constitution. These things can change, and they can change very quickly, and they can change in very bad and harmful ways. That almost happened last year with PIPA and SOPA. Yes, we won, but you know something? It came about this close to happening, this close to the internet changing fundamentally in ways that would have been bad for your business, bad for society, and would have totally undercut the positive potential of the internet. So the way you keep those bad things from happening is you gotta engage. You gotta engage, because only you can maintain an open and free internet that will allow the internet's full potential to bloom and go forward.
Great, thank you. As a segue into my next question, I want to mention that last year, Erik Martin and Reddit's co-founder Alexis Ohanian traveled across the country into rural America on a bus to champion internet freedom. They made a movie about it. It's called Digital Prairie. Silicon Prairie. I'm sorry, Silicon Prairie. And I want to find out both how that was received, and Drew is in the movie as well.
We were the last stop.
That's fantastic. It's really good. You've got to check it out. I want to find out how your message was received, but also I want to find out why you guys took on this project. What do you fear if people don't get this message is going to happen to the internet? What's the post-apocalyptic Terminator, future that we're trying to avoid by engaging people? Yeah,
Clearly Detroit.
Sure. So I mean, we took that bus tour, sort of specifically and almost symbolically through the heartland, through the frontier of America, if you will, because I think in a lot of ways that's sort of what the internet is. It's this unknown chance. It's this unknown potential. It's this thing that could put a dent in some of the really big problems we have in the world, right? It could actually change things in a meaningful way. And I think all of the people that we met, whether they were, truck drivers at a truck stop, or farmers, or startup people, or university students, regardless of their political leanings. And we met people on both extremes. We met, truck drivers that had, no Obama stickers on the back of their truck, to, the college radio DJ at the University of Iowa that was as far to the other end as you could get. But everyone kind of got really quickly, without much explaining, that yes, the internet is this, it's this frontier. It's this open, it's this open road, and there's all kinds of possibilities, and got that, kind of, even though there might be some, in a narrow focus, there might be some good reasons to sort of slow that down and put some various rules in, that, anything that sort of stops this or limits this frontier also limits the chance that this thing could actually put a dent in some of these real problems.
Drew, what do you fear? Of a closed internet.
Yeah, one of the things that bothers me is that it's sort of it's a friend of mine, Rob Reed, who founded Rhapsody, mentioned this in a talk that I saw him give at South by, where basically he said, especially in like copyright law, where the penalty for copying a song is $250,000, and you end up with situations like the guy that sourced the material in the Steubenville rape case, who incidentally lives the next town over from me, is facing 5 to 10 times more jail time than the people that actually committed the rapes. And this is because things kind of got a little bit out of whack right there. When people weren't looking back in the late 90s, they passed copyright law and made it so onerous and so extreme that it got the law out of whack. And the problem there is systemic. People quit respecting the law when the law is clearly ridiculous. And my concern is that unless the same amount of attention is paid to online stuff as the real stuff, because as was mentioned earlier, it's pretty much ubiquitous at this point, we're gonna end up in some serious trouble. Mostly because I've been saying for a while that if people use air quotes when using the word internet, maybe they shouldn't be legislators on technology. And it's a good way to tell. The internet is not something we do passively anymore, and to treat it as a diversion or a side project, I think, is very dangerous.
Can I really quickly make a plug for Rob Reed's book,
It's
Year
awesome, by
Zero?
the way.
You
Yeah, it's
should
good.
all read it. Well, first of all, it's just awesome and funny and a great book, but it also actually kind of drills down on the problem that Drew is talking about. So it's called Year Zero. It's
He actually
great.
made a plot around an alien race siphoning off all the entire digital music library of the world and ending up getting stuck with the copyright bill for it.
It's the only science fiction book about copyright that I know of, and I think it says something about the Ayatollahs at EFF.
Yes.
So I feel particularly.
Exactly. Wow. It's totally worth it. Check it out. It's the I tell people it, and honestly, it's as funny as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a similar vibe. Yeah.
Okay, so if some of these,
Well, his point was, is like the way he put it, he said, I could go drink an entire bottle of vodka and take off down the expressway at 120 miles an hour, kill a family of 5, and be liable for less damage than I would if I downloaded 10 songs off the internet.
And I think so, when you think about this stuff and when we talk about policy, listen, the last big copyright law was passed in 1976 and it was written largely in the 1960s. And actually recently I tried to Google how much it would cost to buy like a mimeograph machine or a printer, a printing press in the 1960s.
You have to go to the Smithsonian to get it, right?
Yeah, well, you can't even figure out what it would have cost. I got distracted. It was taking too long. But, the point is, the way people copied things when they wrote that law is fundamentally different from the way people copy and share things now. So for a single copy, copyright law says you can be liable for up to $150,000 per one copy. So that could be like a bunch of books that you print on a printing press or one song that you can buy for 99 cents on iTunes. There's some disconnect there. The good news is Congress is slowly starting to look at it. They've realized it's time to update the laws, but that is why everyone needs to remain engaged. Because there are a lot of people in Congress who not only do they not understand, how we all use the internet, they really don't understand how the technology works. I mean, there is a fundamental disconnect there. My feeling is kind of like, let's just not let them screw anything up for the next 10 or 20 years, and then some younger people will get some fresh blood, and it might be better. But we really need community involvement to stop the bad.
we are trying to help with this.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's the way Congress works. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of dealing with the system, it's kind of like a union shop, right? Which is the longer you stick around, the higher you get. And you go to these hearings, like there will be a hearing on some copyright issue, and the members of Congress sit in 3 tiers. The ones who've been around for a long time, they sit up at the top, and then the ones who've been around for a little bit of time, they're in the middle, and the ones who are just elected are kind of on the bottom tier. And just the range of discussion, the guys up at the top, the level of understanding of how the internet works generally is not that great. I mean, everybody's trying their best, but if the internet was invented when you were 70, it is going to be tough for you. And then as you go down, the level of understanding of how it works gets better and better. And then once you get down to the bottom tier, you get these freshmen, these young members who are like younger than me, and they're digital natives. Like, they get this stuff. So the trend is heading in the right direction. I will say that right now we have a window of opportunity, because it used to be, not too long ago, it used to be cute for members of Congress not to know about the internet. I don't know if you remember Senator Ted Stevens at the hearing. It's a series of tubes. Right? It was funny.
It is not a truck.
Right. It's not a truck. It's a series of tubes. It was like grandpa at the Thanksgiving table. It was cute. And then the whole PIPA, SOPA thing came around. And people got so angry. Their switchboards were shut down for 2 days by millions of calls. Basically, their phones melted. And all of a sudden, they realized it is no longer cool to not know about the internet, because obviously my constituents care about this a lot. So now there's a window of opportunity to educate them and teach them about how it works. Teach them about how your business works.
And here's an easy way to explain it, by the way, is that not understanding the internet today is like saying in 1980, I don't understand television.
Yeah.
Which is completely ridiculous. And the fact that people can still get away with saying, well, I don't understand the internet. Well, you're an idiot.
Well, people in this
So I
room,
wouldn't recommend saying that to a sitting member of Congress.
Well, I'll say, tell them I said it, and you can blame me. I'll own it. It's fine.
the people in this room can help teach these guys how the internet works. We build the internet. This is actually a perfect segue into my next question. Actually, when I was up on the Hill working, I believe that I might have met you that day. I certainly met you that day. We were up on my first day fighting on PIPA and SOPA. A congressman told me, who was on the Science and Technology Committee, that one of their fellow Science and Technology Committee members, he had just acquiesced that year to getting his office an Office BlackBerry that they could check out when somebody needed one when they left the office. That is the level of technological understanding that we're dealing with some of these people. So I met a lot of these people up on this stage when we were fighting PIPA and SOPA, and so my next question has to do with, okay, Michael said that we're under threat, internet freedom is under threat by entrenched businesses who don't want to change and innovate, and they would rather attempt to legislate and attempt to control the internet as ways to deal with it. We saw that with the copyright lobby with SOPA and PIPA, and we found a way to win. What lessons did we learn from SOPA and PIPA, and how can we win against other entrenched lobbies?
Well, I mean, I think in particular, we should at some point have the technological discussion about sharing the Office BlackBerry and being able to melt switchboards in the United States Congress. I think there are some people in this room that could probably help with that if you can navigate the procurement process. All of that said, these entrenched interests are there. And part of what I2 Coalition has been doing very well, what we've been doing, and a lot of other people on the stage, is being able to try to shift that balance. Look, when it came to SOPA and PIPA, Hollywood had a 100-year head start. The recording industry had a 100-year head start. They used to have Jack Valenti roaming the halls of the United States Congress, backslapping with senators and congressmen, and now they have a very powerful and very well-funded lobby that's able to make a lot of friends in the United States Congress, and they are there. Decisions are made by people that show up. They have people all up and down K Street that will march in and say, here's what Mickey Mouse wants you to do on copyright. Here's what Sony wants you to do. It's only now, as we're getting more and more voices from this community out and talking about this, that balance is starting to shift. And it is actually beginning to shift because of all of you and people that are taking action personally, whether it's making a phone call, whether it's showing up. You guys do it. We did our Hill Days we were synchronized this year, right, in February? So they lead a trip from the infrastructure industry to Capitol Hill to meet with people. We bring startups there once a year for what we call Startup Day on the Hill. CEA always brings in a great group. There are a bunch of others that are doing this, but it's not about the people sitting on this stage. It's what you guys all can lend to that discussion. That's when the members of Congress start to listen and understand. When you say, here is what I build, let me show you, here, why don't you use it, or here's how you would, or here's what it powers, and you have that conversation. There are good and decent people in the United States Congress and in the administration and in the regulatory agencies who are interested and who will find you interesting. So it is actually you that can beat back the 100-year head start. We're not going to beat them on dollars. We're not going to beat them in history, but we can start fighting for all of the things we believe in, but it's got to be powered by you. So you got to stand up and start and keep fighting.
Did you have something else?
Yeah, I would say too. I mean, we have to keep telling and supporting the positive stories. We have to make sure members of Congress know not just the startups, and not just the tech startups in their districts, but also just normal businesses that have utilized some of these amazing tools, whether it's that have helped them grow their business. In the copyright area, we have to also, sort of do a better job telling stories of artists and creators and filmmakers and businesses that are creating amazing content, amazing ways to share it, and also creating jobs as well.
Can I really quickly just add on to that for one quick thought? I think this is so important, and it's so important for everything, not just the internet. So just take a step back and think about what happened. These crappy copyright bills have come up year after year after year. EFF and CEA, EFF's been around for 22 years fighting them. And we hadn't had much success, unfortunately, until SOPA. And then all of a sudden, on January 18th, 2012, almost 10 million people emailed Congress. Tons of people called. About 7,000 websites went dark. And it was like, oh my God, something is changing. The scales are tipping. People are realizing what is going on. And I think the process story, the story not just about the substantive SOPA, PIPA bills and whatever, but the process of how we impacted the political system that day is striking. And right now, we tend to use that power in the tech world because obviously, it just makes sense. But it's so fascinating to me. Maybe it's because I'm a lawyer and I'm a little bit of like a civil procedure geek or whatever, that's fine. But that's going to change everything. It's going to change all of the debates. And that's really, I don't know, I think it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, imagine instead, that same process happened in something like a farm bill, right? Like this big farm bill that comes down that's basically written in the same way SOPA and PIPA was written by the copyright industry. This one's written by the big agribusiness industry. And just like sites like Fark and Reddit and all these other 7,000 sites went dark.
Well, we went late. Actually.
Well, you guys went.
We were screwing around though. So.
But all these farmers, now have thanks to all these amazing internet tools, now have a way to talk to each other, to talk to people who know what's going on on the policy end, and to talk to their customers and say, hey, that amazing grass-fed beef that you get from me at the farmer's market or whatever online. If you care about that and want to support, the local farm that's down the road from you guys, then talk to your members of Congress and let them know that this farm bill that's coming down is going to screw that up. And I think that is a really
the power to organize that's online now is incalculable, and it is going to go far beyond our issues. It is going to leach into everything because the internet goes into everything. I want to make one point about going dark. I think one of the lesser known stories about the whole SOPA thing is that, and I still vividly remember going to Chavos with you, Erik, at 4th and Bryant, San Francisco in December of 2011, and Erik saying to me, they were going to go dark on January 18th. And that was the first I'd heard of it. And from a very nice burrito, and I'm sure you miss them now living in New York.
They don't make those in New York.
From sharing a very nice burrito to what this became, that was about a month. I mean, we weren't sleeping much, but it was that immense power that, because Erik could, take Reddit and make it dark for the day, and Drew could make Fark go light, but, that in and of itself was not the whole story. The story was that they started a trend that carried across the internet. I mean, and it was much more than then it wasn't just Google and it wasn't just Wikipedia and it wasn't just these guys. It was all of us. And when that collective power gets shown and these tools that we're able to use that flow out of that it's exactly right.
Alexis told me when we were walking through the halls of Congress together, and I had no idea what it was going to become. And to this day, I get chills when I think about that day, about that experience.
Right, but the question we all face is, the whole SOPA thing was neat. It was a great moment. But how do you turn that movement into a sustaining movement? And here is my thought. Number one, your businesses and our industry, you face a lot of threats. One of them is crazy and anachronistic copyright law. But there's also the fact that with our current immigration law, you can't get the engineers you need to get. And there are talented people who come to the United States and get PhDs and start businesses and get seed funding, and then we tell them, you gotta leave, you gotta go, and we toss them out of the country, which is crazy. There is this absolute epidemic of patent troll lawsuits, where people filing frivolous lawsuits against your companies and trying to extort money out of you. So there are all these issues that need to be addressed, and need to be addressed urgently for you to succeed. There are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, join the I2 coalition. Like Christian and his group are doing amazing work every day on these issues in DC. And you guys came out of nowhere a year ago, and now you're an established, respected DC presence on this issue, and you're doing amazing stuff. Number two, get to know your member of Congress. Get to know them. Right now, the most important aspect in any debate in Congress, because of the economy being the way it is jobs. So it's all about job creators. Okay, so any one of you as a job creator, running your company and creating jobs, has much more credibility than me as a lobbyist. So get to know your member of Congress. Write them, call them. When they're doing a town hall, go see them in your district. Invite them to come and visit your company, which they love to do. They'll do it. But you got to build that relationship. And it's work. It's work. But if you do it, then the benefits will be immense. I
want to add on to that real quick, because you guys, in many respects, work with hosting companies, right? So not only can you tell the story of all the jobs you're creating with your companies, you can talk about the fact that in the communities in which your companies are living and working, that there are 4.3 jobs on average created because of the jobs that you create. So in the non-tradable sector, everybody from restaurant workers to lawyers, that happen in that community because you came to town and you opened up a server farm or a hosting company or whatever it is, right? But also, when you bring in your member of Congress, which some of you should absolutely do, and they'll do it in a heartbeat. Tell the story of the sites that you host, of your customers, and the jobs that they're creating, and the tools that they build, because it's exactly as Erik said, and this is so true. It's how it penetrates into the brick and mortar businesses and people that may not consider themselves working for the internet or on the internet, but they make a living on the internet too. It's the Etsy sellers, it's the people that sell stuff on eBay, it's the Uber drivers, it's people that have a food truck, it's other things that people are doing in that way. But there's so much of a story to tell when you really fan out and think about the effect that you have. That's going to turn heads with people that can legislate, because they'll say, wow, I have to support this because I'm going to get all of these people to vote for me if I do it right.
I want to take an opportunity to shift a little bit, because we're talking about the incredible things that we're doing today, but we're not just fighting for today, we're fighting for tomorrow, and we've got an opportunity here. We've got, Drew and Erik, you run two of the most popular websites on the internet. Michael, you work with consumer electronics companies that are doing incredible things with internet-connected devices. Mike, you work with startup companies doing incredible things, pushing the boundaries of innovation. So I want to know what you guys see as, what's the internet going to look like in 5 years? Where are we heading? What incredible things are coming down the pike? And how will legislation and regulation affect that outlook?
Well, I'll give a sort of rosy outlook, in that part of the economic study that we did in terms of the economic impact of the internet and internet-related businesses in the U.S. shows that if we continue to grow at current rates and we bring in and create a network of talent that's able to continue that growth, it looks like a hockey stick to the right in terms of economic growth and impact across the United States. Here's the problem. If we don't fix a broken immigration system, if we don't figure out how to get patent trolls to stop working and chilling innovation, if we don't figure out how we get more people access to good quality, whether it's fiber, broadband, LTE spectrum, whatever it is, if we don't continue to invest in education and computer science and people to get into these jobs and don't create that talent pool here in the US, that graph flattens out. So the internet that we can create and the sites that we can create and the products, those possibilities are almost limitless and can drive huge economic growth and be an absolute, if not the absolute leader in growth in the United States going forward. But we've got some serious regulatory and legislative hurdles to get over to get there. The first one for us is immigration. We've got a lot of people, as Michael said, that are getting the finest education in the world at places like the University of Texas right here in town, or Harvard or Stanford or MIT, or you name it, any of our great colleges and universities. They weren't born here, and when they get that education and they want to start business or work in technology, we're sending them home. Or worse, we're sending them to competitive nations like Canada or Chile or the United Kingdom, where they've rolled out the welcome mat for entrepreneurs and startups. We have to fix the immigration system that we've got. We've got to keep them here. We've got to keep this country growing. We've got to fix the patent thing. And Julie is doing such incredible work on this with the EFF, and we're proud to partner with them and I2 and others to do this. But if we don't fix those two issues right now today, and we don't really take action on those legislative and regulatory fronts, and I mean we as in all of us in this room, then all of that growth and all of that prosperity and all of the possibilities really do start to go away. And that's one thing we really have to caution against.
Anybody else?
I could maybe tell a story. We haven't really told a lot of stories. Maybe I'll tell a quick story about, what can go wrong or what is really kind of bad. And I'll talk about patents because that's what I spend a lot of my time focusing on. Here's a story of one patent troll. It's called Lodsys. It owns a patent that it argues covering every time you go into an app and you get click to upgrade, you're like an Angry Bird and it's like click here to get more boards. It claims that it owns that technology. So it starts sending letters to all of these app developers all over the country and abroad saying, you're infringing our 2 patents. Here's this big legal stack of papers. You got to pay us what you're making on your app, some percentage of what you're making on your app. In the meantime, all those app developers get that technology from Apple and Google, right? And also in the meantime, it turns out that app developers make the most money from in-app upgrades. That's the best way to be profitable. These people can't afford lawyers. They have no idea about this patent, both the patents. They didn't invent the technology. They're just using what they've got. And they're faced with this terrible situation. So what happens? They take their apps out of the US market. They just, stop developing them. Why, a lot of people do it because they love to do it, because it's fun. And all of a sudden they're facing this problem. So, that's just one example. That's just app developers. This is happening across the board, like crazy patent trolls who claim they own all shopping cart technology, all scanning technology. And when you have this kind of really dangerous environment for innovation, it has a chilling effect on innovation. And it's really dangerous because we don't know the technologies we're not seeing. We don't know the products we're not seeing because of that. So that's just, one for instance, to give you a flavor of what we're talking about.
And here's the funny thing. On the patent troll issue, I get more calls from my members on this, just on a weekly basis, than any other issue. I get calls from members on this who are in tears. They don't know what to do. So I thought the problem was pretty bad. And then I came down here yesterday, and I spent the last day talking with you in the audience and people attending this event. The problem is actually worse than I thought. I've heard even more horror stories. So it's an epidemic. It's completely out of control. The good news is that Congress has finally woken up to this issue. There are those of us on this panel who for years have been waving our arms and screaming about this, like Horton Hears a Who, and nobody was listening. And finally, Congress has woken up to this. The president gave a statement about this. The president talking about patent trolls, which is something I never thought I'd see. There have been several good pieces of legislation introduced that would definitely take a bite out of the problem. And we are very, very close And again, I did not think if somebody had told me this would have happened 6 months ago, I would have said they were crazy. But we are very, very close to getting legislation over the goal line that will help alleviate this problem. We are being opposed by very, very strong and powerful interests, namely the patent lawyers. They are strong, they are tough, they have a lot of money. They're probably the most formidable adversary in Washington. So whether or not we get this done is going to depend on you. So you're going to help us, and you're going to help us right now. Everybody take out your smartphone. Please, everybody take out your smartphone. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to send a text to your member of Congress asking them to stop patent litigation abuse and specifically to support a very good bill called the SHIELD Act, which would impose loser pays on patent trolls who take cases to court. Let me explain. The reason why patent trolls are so successful is because filing lawsuits is very simple and very cheap. Defending lawsuits is very complex and very expensive, right? So what this SHIELD Act would do would be to reverse those economic incentives and make it not a good deal all of a sudden to be a patent troll. Take out your smartphone, text trolls, TROOLS, to 52886.
I guess I better do it.
Down there.
And you should get an email back, and you're sending a message to your member of Congress. Thank you very much. We just took
52886.
52886, trolls. Yes.
Interactive.
I'll mention that the CEA is using a startup company called Phone to Action to do this. We love, in this community, leveraging startup tools
Right.
in new and interesting ways. But
Yes, and it's a wonderful company called Phone to Action, which was actually founded by an immigrant entrepreneur. So we're wrapping up immigration and patent trolls into one issue, which is kind of a twofer.
Well, I just did that. Took about 2 seconds.
Wonderful.
And maybe we can make a difference. That's fantastic. Really exciting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everybody. When we founded I2 Coalition, I never suspected that patent trolls was going to be one of the things that we're working on. I thought that it was a big business issue, and the internet infrastructure community is predominantly made up of small to medium businesses, probably about 35,000 that are, most of them make under $100 million a year, some significantly less. And so I just didn't think it was an issue that touched those communities, but I've realized how much it is really killing these communities in particular because they're small businesses and easier to target, and because a lot of us work in the open source environments where the patent trolls are running rampant these days. And so it's a very important issue for us. And Drew's doing incredible work, Michael's doing incredible work, everybody up here, Julie is the queen of fighting patent trolls.
we can get business cards made with that too. Right under the
No, thanks.
I want to talk about, okay, give me 2 more really important issues to internet freedom right now.
Sure. So I just came back from visiting Latvia for a Reddit meetup. And when I was in Latvia last week, I saw a demo day from a tech incubator in Latvia. And as the MC was giving all of the, was kind of going over all the prizes that were at stake for this competition, one of the top prizes was 2 years of super awesome hosting from Softlayer. And they got immediately interrupted by someone who said, hey, is that a US company? Do they have servers in the, outside the US? And then that started, this is in the middle of just, we wasn't planning to get questions from the audience at this point. And then that started a debate between members of the audience about, well, is it actually worse to have servers overseas? Because they got right into all the NSA Prism stuff. And what should have been a really awesome thing that that Softlayer was doing to support tech startups in Riga, Latvia, turned into something else because of the policies of our government. And so it was that I think within a couple days changed the perception of entire communities around the world, and I think will impact how they look at getting various services from U.S. companies, and that really
tremendous,
sucks.
that's a tremendous point.
Just on a business standpoint, outside of all the privacy issues.
I wonder if we could do a show of hands thing in this room. For those of you who work at hosting companies, who has, in the last couple of weeks, felt like they've lost customers or have seen that happen because of people not wanting to host data in the United States?
Oh,
Is
I'd
that-
say.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, EFF's done a lot of
business.
work on this kind of like what
Phenomenal.
intermediaries can do to protect their customers and to protect, in the face of existing laws. And, we don't have time to go into all the things now, but we also have a program called Who's Got Your Back, where we actually give companies stars for what they do to protect their customers. And you would be shocked what companies do to get stars. We constantly are. It's great. But, the point is there is a lot you can do. You can go to EFF.org. I'm happy to talk to you guys a little bit about it after. Protecting your customers is not only good for your customers, but it's good business. I think that is probably a lot harder in light of what's gone down in the past couple of weeks. But I also think, I don't think we're done finding out what's gone down in the past couple of weeks, so it sort of remains to be seen.
Right, and a lot of information hasn't come out. I do need to get a plug in for something. This is a perfect segue. We have actually added a panel to the panels that we are curating and doing. Tomorrow at 12 in the lunchroom, we're going to be doing a really exciting panel on NSA Prism. I'll be moderating that one too. And I really suggest that you come and see that. It's going to be very interesting. But as we're finding out what's really going on, what's really happening with NSA Prism, you look for ways to make an impact and make your voice be heard. How do you do something on something that's not really necessarily a legislative issue? It's an executive issue. It's a law enforcement program. How can you make an impact with something like that?
Well, Congress obviously votes on things, so you can influence votes. But the executive branch, the White House, even judges, they don't live in a bubble. They read the newspaper. They're on the internet. Public opinion does sway those offices. Not as directly, but it does. So, you stay involved and you talk about it. And part of what's so disturbing about this whole PRISM thing is that we never had a public debate about it. And we're having a public debate now, or we're starting to. And, to the extent that that's what's happening, I'm saying, great. Like, we need to talk about, how we feel in this country about this type of stuff. I, personally have a lot of problems with what I think is going on, but, you might not, and that's fair, but let's at least talk about it. So you got to be part of that debate.
Yeah, and I think that there's some tone setting that can happen there. And we've talked, all of our organizations, host members of Congress or travel to Washington, and we've also hosted at our office in San Francisco 3 members of the Federal Trade Commission, 2 FCC commissioners. We're having a meeting with the Small Business Administration's Advocacy office in a couple weeks. So we bring the regulators in, and that's not. There's no bill there on a lot of things, but it's giving them access to resources. You can be that resource because you're going to have perspective that they're not going to have in the bubble that is the Beltway in Washington or wherever it is. And as I like to say, Washington is almost as bad a bubble as, not a bubble, but a echo chamber as Silicon Valley. So, and vice versa, depending on where I am. But it's so important, and any one of us, this is why you got to join I2. This is why you got to join Engine. It's free. This is why you got to sign up with EFF and Innovation Movement at CEA and, follow interesting subreddits, on politics and just, keep up on this. We want you, all of us, we want you to go, we want you to go build your business. That's what I want you to spend 100% of your time on. Let us do the dirty work in a lot of ways, but there are going to be sort of key points in time. We'll let you know when those are. We'll bring you in. And when you have ideas of things that you want to take action on, and I think, we got to have an honest conversation about privacy in this country. We just got to do it. And it's not going to be fun, and there's going to be a lot of interest, but that's something where there's no bill right now, well, with the exception of ECPA reform, which is a pretty big deal. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act is going for an update right now, which is going to have a critical impact on business. We got to have a conversation about what we actually want to give up and what we're willing to have taken from us and that kind of thing. That's something that can only happen in your office with the people that are doing it. So hook up with us. We'll get everybody together on this. We'll act as conveners and all that. But this is the time to have that conversation, and there's a lot that you can do to help influence that debate.
I have one extra thing to throw in too. I tell people that I can tell we're living in the future because there's really nothing they can announce tomorrow that would surprise me that they came up with technology-wise. And there's been a few times where they've announced, hey, we just invented this thing, and I'm like, we didn't have that already? I'm kind of surprised. Given that that's the case, though, wouldn't it be a good idea to start thinking about legislation in terms of not necessarily also what we've got currently today, but for example, the fact that people are upset about drone strikes, I can't believe people didn't see that coming when we started using it for non-combat reconnaissance. I mean, it's just stick a gun on the damn thing and there you go. This was coming. Think about all the other things that are coming, like genome sequencing and life insurance. You know, whether or not you get denied care based on whether or not if they can sequence your entire genome and get to the point where they can tell what month you're likely to die in, does that impact your health premium? Probably. Seems to me that'd be the case. I have a friend of mine who's working at a biotech startup on a long-term goal to essentially give you an injection that reverts you back to age 20. Now, he's a long way off from this, but he thinks he's going to get there in 20 years.
Wow. Want to know your friend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
You have a
better
business
this
card for
morning.
him?
So I've got one final question, and then maybe we'll have time for a question or two from the crowd. And that is, we're very happy that we got a number of people to come out and talk to us and see us today and get engaged, and it's fantastic. These are things that if we planned this 2 years ago, I don't think we would have gotten the number of people that we have in the room. There's more of an appetite than there's ever been for this type of engagement, but it's probably not enough. How do you get the people who don't have the wherewithal to come to an event like this? How do you get them engaged? How do you get them excited about fighting for internet freedom?
I think, obviously, you're here, so you get it. What I would ask everybody to do is to essentially be a digital Paul Revere. And make the point that you rely on certain assumptions about the way the internet works, just for your business and for your personal life. And you rely on certain laws that underpin those things. And the point is that all that stuff is really, really tenuous. And it can change. And there are powerful interests that are trying to change it every single day. So everybody, again, you need to be engaged. Email or write your member of Congress. Better yet, go see her while you're at a town hall. Join I2, that's a slam dunk. Look at Engine. Join and become a member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. They're a foundation, right? So Julie does great work, but she doesn't do it for free. Read Reddit, read Tector, educate yourself on the issues, because you can do it. Let me tell you a quick story. I think we keep coming back to SOPA just because it provides like a template of the way things can happen if we do it right. And I was in a coffee shop after the whole SOPA bill got pulled and we had won. And I had my iPad on the counter and it had a SOPA fail sticker on the back still. There was a young woman behind the counter and she said, "I like your sticker." And I said, "Yeah, well, it all kind of worked out okay, didn't it?" And she said, "Yeah, I still can't believe it. It restored my faith in everything, basically." But the point is that people
Man, did you ever walk into the right
No, but the point is, there's this belief out there that Washington is this like monolithic thing, this like robot that runs around and does what it wants to do, and there's no way you can influence it. But that's not true, especially given the tools and empowerment that the internet gives you. If you get together and you use those tools, you can do things, and you can, as happened in the case of SOPA, overcome the most powerful interests in DC to create a pro-innovation, pro-technology, pro-society agenda. But all you got to do is do it. You got the tools. So please get engaged, because it's possible.
I think there's also a contextualization issue. People really don't get engaged until you can tell them why they should care. It's one thing to say you should stand up and fight for this stuff, and obviously we should, but you have to tell them why. And I started thinking about issues that I feel very strongly about in that context and found a way to, so when I'm talking to people about patent trolls, people are like, well, why should I care about patent trolls? It's like, well, they extracted $80 billion from the economy last year. Where do you think that money came from? They're like, well, other businesses, sure. Where did they get it from? They got it from you. They took it right out of your pocket. They charged you extra money so they could pay these guys.
Yeah, and it's not just you guys, because I think you probably all care a little, get it, you're here already. But I was just with my family in Chicago over the weekend, and I was talking to my mom, and I'm trying to explain these things, to my older mother, and it's you got to spread the word. Because I think a lot of people, you're in this business where you have a feeling of what's going on, but a lot of people don't. Yeah,
you have to drill it down. Like I got interviewed by Time Magazine on patent trolls, and they said, pretend that my audience is 5. And I said, it's economic terrorism. They're like, oh, that's good. What else you got? I'm like, it's like legalized extortion. People can grab onto these concepts. That means something to them.
Erik, you run Reddit, and that's like sort of the great democratization of content, and so you see every day what seems to percolate up in the public consciousness and what doesn't. And I'm sure that you've seen things that you thought were going to explode like SOPA that didn't. Have you been able to gauge what seems to resonate with people when it comes to internet freedom?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, there's a, I mean, I think the great thing is that I think this kind of whatever millennial generation that's coming up is much more interested in process, is much more interested in everything. I think they would buy cameras and watch their food be digested if they could. Like they want to see what's going on. So I think that's good. The problem is there's a lot of cynicism, right? And that's the biggest hurdle to overcome. So anytime you have something that's able to just kind of jump over that hurdle of cynicism, you start to see things taking off. Right now, the biggest example, and I think also a good example to show like what could be down the road in 2020 or whatever, is there's a movement called Restore the Fourth that's only about 2 weeks old that came about as a response to all of the NSA and Prism stuff. Snowden mentioned it in his interview when it was less than 24 hours old, right? This is an organic grassroots movement that happened to start on Reddit, but it could have been any other place too, that now has July 4th protests planned in like 14 different cities. And the speed at which this happened, the different, the diversity of people it's pulling in from around the world, whether you care about that particular issue or not, it shows you, how things could happen in the future about whatever that issue that you do care about is, whether it's environment or guns or you name it. Like people can now organize so fast and so powerfully, and we've got to be able to protect that. But the things that don't get off the ground are ones that can't get over that sort of hurdle of cynicism.
Well, I want to, let's see. Anyway, I want to thank you guys very much for coming. In the tradition of democratization of content, though, I want to see if we can squeeze in one last question that comes from somebody in the crowd. So if anybody has one question. Go ahead. Carol.
So my question is, how do you balance the flip side of this debate? Someone comes to you and says, the internet is great, and it enables business, and it does all this stuff, but there are negative aspects to it. Theft exists. Bad stuff happens because the internet enables it. There are many, many examples that your Congress critter or your lobbyist can pull out of their hat and say, look, that's bad, we need to stop it. Look, this thing demands action, and there was some terrible porn, there was some egregious act of theft. They too can pull out content producers and writers and creators and say, look, I lost money because my stuff's all over the internet and nobody's paying me for it. So what do you say when those examples come out? I mean, can you just overwhelm it with puppies and rainbows and money, or are there specific arguments for combating the dark side of this equation, the other side is saying that's really what I'd like to
So I think we have comebacks, for most specific examples that can't really get into every one now. But, to give the kind of optimistic picture, I'd say, frankly, that's kind of how democracy works. Like we go and we make our point, and someone else goes and they make their point, and what we end up with is probably going to end up somewhere in between those two. And we hope it's closer to what we want to see, and we might disagree a little bit with what comes out, but sometimes the system does work, and we have to compromise.
I mean, I think the internet's a reflection of the society at large. There are bad actors. That's a problem. Now, we could sit all day and talk about bad examples of bad people doing bad stuff on the internet, but there's also been, I think, an industry move that's reflected by a lot of you guys that is trying to combat that internally, to our world and trying to set standards, and that's part of this international multi-stakeholder model that we all really, are trying to protect, where no one has enough power so that the bad actors can really rise all that far. We try to clamp down on that internally, but when that fails, and government does get involved at times, we need to make sure that it's something that doesn't constrict. But Julie's right. It's a democracy. We're going to make our point, and they're going to make theirs. We might not agree all the time. We are going to agree a lot of the time. We should focus on that as much as we can. But it goes beyond, though we do very well at puppies and rainbows and sunshine. It goes beyond that to, we can have an honest dialogue about what's happening on the internet, because it's a reflection of our daily lives as well. And so in the same way we can have that conversation, we can have it online.
Yeah, I guess what I would add quickly is it's kind of the opposite of puppies and rainbows. What we find is that we do very well as an industry when we can have a very substantive, honest, fact-based debate. Even with SOPA, we had a bill introduced that would have effectively done the same thing, which is cut off credit card payments to offshore pirates, right, without doing the collateral damage. And we were able to go to members of Congress and say, we don't like this bill, but here's a bill that would achieve the same effect without breaking the internet. How about doing that? We find that our biggest obstacle is simply the lack of knowledge among a lot of members of Congress about how our technology works, how our business works. And that's why educating them is such a priority. Because if they're educated and if they understand, we're going to do quite well in most of these debates.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my panelists, every one of whom is helping us fight for a better internet in the future. Please visit their sites, find out more about them. Fark.com, Reddit.com, CE.com, EFF.org, and Engine.is.
We're not in Iceland, by the way. It was a cutesy choice of TLD.
And come visit I2 Coalition. Go to i2coalition.com or come see us at our booth during the show. Thank you, everybody, very much.
We are so good.